joining us today for another episode of What's Your Why Wednesday. And today, this is going to be a very special episode. And I am joined by someone very special to me, Mr. Jason Frazier. And I asked him to join us today because today will officially be the final episode of What's Your Why Wednesday. And the reason why we decided to end it here is this is actually the 100th episode of me having the pleasure and honor and joy of hearing from so many different people in the mortgage and real estate industry, sharing their why and giving some of their insights. So today, as we wrap this up, I asked Jason to join us so that I can actually share in this final episode what my why is. So right now we're going to flip the script a little. We're going to hand it over to Jason and we're going to get started.
Well, thanks, Laura, so much. And I can't even, I can't even tell you how honored I am that, for you to ask me to do this. It's great. And, you have definitely been someone since I met, which is, I was thinking about this before we came on, is that when we first met, the very first time we met and even had any type of discussion was me interviewing you on a show. If you remember, all the way back in Irvine at an AIM event. That was the very first time we met. And I think we even said afterwards, like, hey, I knew that when we talked and met that we will end up collaborating, staying connected, having some, a relationship in this industry, just because it was such a great interview. So being able to, and here we are, fast forward years later, and me kind of coming full circle and being able to do this on your show and interviewing you is just great. So I'm very, again, honored that you would ask me and blessed to be here. And I'm excited to get going because I know a little bit of your story. Maybe some of your listeners don't, but this is going to be a great episode. And look, hey, if you're listening to this and you've loved every single one of the 99 episodes before this, it wasn't me. Don't get mad at me. Don't say, hey, Frazier came on, all of a sudden she stopped her podcast. So this is a planned event. So without further ado, let's get into it and let me put you on the other side of the interviewer's table. And let me ask you, what is your why, my friend?
Yes. Well, it's funny answering that question, being on the opposite. I actually think back of all of the different whys that I have heard, right? And then from listening to those stories and always learning and growing, I've realized your why changes, right?
Yep.
When you're young, maybe your why is, I want a career doing this, right? And then it's, I want to take care of my family, right? Then it's, I want to be successful so I can even take care of more people on top of just my family. And so if I answer that question at this day and time in 2023, my why is my legacy. My why is my impact that I can leave on this world, whether it's professionally or personally. Every single one of us will leave an imprint in the sand of time. And it's important for me that as I make decisions every single day, how I treat someone, how I respond to someone, the decisions that I make, I want to make sure that that imprint in the sand will ultimately create a positive ripple to all of those people that I come in contact with. Because we all have that power. Sometimes we just don't remember that we have it.
Yeah, it's what the first word that comes to mind after hearing that is it's deeper. That's your why, but it's also purpose, right? Because leaving an impact, a positive impact, leaving a legacy. I know that's my purpose. And that's one thing where you always had to distinguish between like a why and purpose. And that's, and it's different for everyone, right? A why, people are, equated to their kids or job, making money, which is nothing wrong with that because they have a reason for wanting to make money and everything in between. And it's from, it's a purpose driven life, and
Yes.
from someone that's obviously, known you for the years, and seen you on stage, and you got books and everything in between, is you are fulfilling that why. And they do change, right? Because you have a different, but I think it's a deeper, it's purpose with that, right? Your why, I think your why, as you said, coming through, it's different, maybe 1 year, one season in your life, but then you get to where you're at now and realize, like, hey, this is my purpose. Like, this is
Yeah.
why I'm here to do. And you definitely, and look, if you've never been on this, or never listened to this podcast before, and you've never seen Laura or anything like that, it's and again, nothing to take away from anyone, all the wonderful people we know in this industry, but it's very few people where you could say that is true purpose from every single instance, event, conversation that I've had with you, is that. And anyone that knows you will say, like, yeah, that's your, that you're living it, right? You're proving what you're saying. So that's great. Like, I love it. And so to go further into that, I'd like to hear a story that you have of where that purpose of making an impact on someone else, whether it's a company or an event or just a conversation or someone that you were mentoring. But what's a story where you made an impact with someone?
So this one goes way back, way back, very early in my career. And I've never forgotten it in all these years. So it was very early that I was in the mortgage industry. And God, it was probably one of the first loans I originated. And I remember that this woman came to us and said, I need to buy a house because my son, and she was a woman of color, my son is graduating 8th grade. And I cannot allow him to go to a high school in the neighborhood in which we are because I'm fearful that he will go in a bad path or not be able to be successful in his future life. So I am on a mission to move out of where we are into a more rural area with a good school system because I need to make a change for my family to ensure his future. And I remember, to this day, I can remember this 25 years ago. I can remember this woman. And the next thing that happened, it was the first time I ever did an FHA loan in a rural area. And I did not know about well and septics. I made a mistake because I didn't communicate to this woman that had very little cash funds. She didn't expect to have inspections. She didn't expect to have the delay in closing. Mm-hmm. And I remember that feeling I had of learning that lesson, right? Getting her through that, working through what kind of credits we can give and what we can do and how we can make this happen and how we can still close on time and all of that. And then the final culmination of that. So I'm learning her why, making a mistake early in a career and mm-hmm. understanding you're going to make a mistake, yeah. Right? And getting through that. And then the day of closing, that woman came to our office in the finest Sunday best suit she could wear. And she had a flower in her jacket, all dressed as if, like she won the beauty pageant. And she said, this is the best day of my entire life. And it's all because you took the time to help me get my credit on par, help me be able to qualify, walk me through when we ran into a struggle. And now my son can go to high school in a good school system. I will never forget that beautiful woman and her family. And that carried through my entire career because there were so many lessons that I learned from that woman that And it's funny, Jason, I know you're going to ask me some advice for people coming in, because
Yeah.
that's always what we speak about. That's it. Like, don't ever forget what it was like when you were starting out, right? Like, for the people, that's to answer the question of later in your career.
Yeah.
Don't ever forget that, because we are going to make mistakes sometimes, and we are going to learn lessons, and we are going to have that feeling. Don't ever get hard to it. Keep that feeling for every family that you help, for every person that you guide, for every celebration of closing and helping that family, because whether they're wearing their Sunday best or not, that is one of the biggest things that they will ever do in their life. Even if, whether it's a cash out, whether it's lowering their rate, whether it's a purchase, whether it's that second home, whatever it is, it's a big deal. But don't get hard to it. Don't get to the point where you forget what that feels like. Go back and remember it.
That story is one that is so foundational to one of the things that I talk about quite a bit, and that is this about the love of this industry, right? And and you're the embodiment of that. And we've had this conversation about my mom, and a lot of the parallels with how you came up in the business when you told me your story. And it's that if we do this, when we do this business the right way, when we put that, and you put your why, you put your purpose into it, is that we can change lives, but not just a life of someone there, but it's generational, right? So taking that story and knowing that, hey, you not only changed her life, but you helped her, change the stars for her son who had graduated, and give him a better opportunity, a better chance than what he was going to have before. And then that trickles down. It just doesn't end. And then his kids, right? And people he comes into contact with. And you just don't think about that. Is that, look, it's easy to say, it's easy to look at numbers in a business like this, the commoditized nature of what this industry can be sometimes. And the frustration, right? I think, look, and everyone hears that story. And if you're an originator, right? And I've grew up around them, I could tell you, like, there's always the, pain in the butt agent, pain in the butt consumer. But, to your point, Laura, is that don't ever forget where you came from in this business, when you didn't know everything, when you did make mistakes, but when you do have that person that's not grateful, that doesn't care, and doesn't even have any type of, outlook like you do, that you could always fall back on someone who you change. Because that, when I could tell you from owning my first house, is that culminates in your attitude and how you outlook and how you treat people. So imagine if she was so uplifted and excited and grateful that then she helped someone else that maybe she just at that time wouldn't have done, not just because she didn't want to, just but maybe circumstances, but maybe that day was a day to help someone else. And then that person, it's a waterfall effect. And I truly believe in it. That's why in this industry, like I say, it's very few, when, like, building cars or whatever, sure, like, this is things that people dream of. This is something that can have a trickle down effect, not just in that own generation, but then everyone that they have interaction with. And so that's why it's important to help everyone, regardless of whether it's income, credit, or whatever. Is you stuck with them, like you helped them, you actually helped them. You weren't just looking at, oh, well, I can't, there's no instant gratification, no instant ROI. I'm actually going to go deeper than that. And so that's why I love what you just said, that story. It brings everything together. And on top, you already gave some great advice, but getting to that question is because I think it's not just for the new people, because obviously you do have a lot of new people that have come in the last 2 years that have only known good times, only known like refis falling off trees. So great, there's some newer people that could use what you're going to say. But I also would say for those that have been, roughed up a bit from last year, and they may need some advice too, because I think regardless, just because of what you've done in this industry, all the experience, and not just experience, but all of the expertise that you have, is what advice would you give just to an originator that's trying to change their purpose and what they're doing?
Yeah. And yeah, I was just thinking as you were speaking, I was thinking about how old that child would be now. And he's like 38 years old. So like think about that, right?
Yeah,
Like that
yeah,
that
yeah,
child probably has children
yeah.
now growing up in, in northern northwest New Jersey, So it's just interesting to me as you were speaking. I'm like, yeah, there is a ripple there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So awesome. All right. So advice for originators. I think we covered a little bit of it of
Mhm.
keep your relationship strong. I mean, I know that everybody tells people to do that, but you started our conversation with you and I met in 2018 or 19. It was somewhere
Mhm.
around
Yep.
there. And we still to this day, regardless of the fact that we don't work together, that we're not, it's not like something that we're not living around the corner from each
Yep.
other, but yet we still check in with each other and we
Mhm.
still have those relationships. So be confident in who you are, because I find that so many times originators are like, well, they don't need me right now. They don't have a need for a refinance, or they don't have a need for a purchase. Don't ever discredit yourself, because if you are going into something saying they don't need me, you're wrong. Right there, you have a mindset of you're just selling. You're actually not selling at all. What you're doing is bonding a relationship, and you're showing a family or an individual that you care about them. You have an interest in them, you're vested in them, you want to be part of their life. And so that when you take out that, well, they don't need me, or I can't speak to them now because their interest rate is 2.5, and the interest rates are higher than 2.5 right now, you're wrong. Because so many times, and I'll tell you another thing about listening to stories on this podcast, so many times I've heard people share a story about how they helped somebody that was like a $50,000 loan. And by helping that $50,000 loan, they referred them over that it turns out their sister is like the top realtor in like another
Yep.
section of the state or something, right? Or the next
Mhm.
loan they got as a referral from them was like a $3 million loan. Like there's always stories like that. That
Yep.
I would say number one is your relationships. You have to go into them, not of what's in it for me. It's honestly having that connection between the two of you. So that is one. Relationship is number one. Number two, you mentioned about the expertise, right? You never, never, never will know everything about what we do in the industry. Every single day, you're learning something new. Every single day, there's more opportunity to become an expert. Question: be curious, reach out to people. It happens to me all the time where people will reach out on LinkedIn or Facebook or something. They're like, hey, I'm curious about this, or can you spend 5 minutes with me about that? Don't ever be afraid to do that. Reach out to people. You may be very surprised at how open people are to say, sure, I'll give you a few moments to have a conversation about this or that or whatever, as long as you go into it with the right intention. Don't
Yeah.
spam people. Don't ask to sell them. Don't do that. But stay curious and continually ask those questions. And then the biggest one right now is, please, 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 you've heard it all before. Good times and bads, up cycles and down cycles. Don't go out and spend all your money when times are really, really good. Because if you're going to be in this industry for a very long time, you have to make sure that you can ride out when things get a little lean, and you're putting away when things are raining.
Yeah. That last piece, I think it, and I know it's probably some people are like, man, I wish wish this episode would have been like a year and a half ago, but it's not always rainbows and gumdrops, right? There is rain, and bring an umbrella, and you do have to, in this business, it's always peaks and valleys. That's one thing my mom told me growing up. There's always peaks and valleys in this business. And you could say that for everything, but in this business, sometimes those valleys are deep, my friends. And so that is all that advice, the relationship piece, all of it is just, it's important. And I think you said an important word in all of that, and that's ripple.
Yeah.
You, my friends, all of you, especially Laura, if anything, has dropped a tremendous rock and a great lake of origination and created ripples. I could easily say the story of how I met Laura in our conversation since and relationship has made an impact at me, and it has. And so all of you out there, whether you're starting new, and look, you're never too old to make an impact, right? Whether doesn't matter your age or experience or anything like that, you can always make a positive impact. So I love that you use the term ripple, because that's the word I was fighting for, but that is your ripple effect that you can have as an impact positively to people whenever you help somebody. And so it's a tremendous advice.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. This was wonderful. I truly, truly appreciate you doing this with me. This will be our lasting impact as we close out What's Your Why. And to everyone out there, thank you so much for listening. Please go back and listen to all the wonderful stories and whys from all those other 99 people that took the time to share with all of us. Continue to be a bright light to everyone, because together we can do anything and get through anything. And there's only bright and light ahead of us. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for having me.